joy and struggle can coexist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is probably the most important second hurdle, because we live in a culture that's obsessed with either or thinking,
Mm-hmm.
winning or losing, okay or not okay. That kind of binary thinking is what makes it hard to say, wait, these two feelings can coexist at the same time. And I love to share a story about my dad who taught me this lesson, because he grew up in Miami-Dade County in a neighborhood that clearly sent a message that said, you are not going to move beyond this little 5 block radius.
Mm.
This is your life. But my dad, like so many of us immigrant children, so many of us first gen children, we dared to dream something bigger for ourselves, even though that circumstance and messaging was strong.
Mm-hmm. What is good, y'all? It is your boy Jonathan Jamal, and this is Highly Visible and a Little Misunderstood, the show where we talk to the people we see every day because we don't know what we miss until we miss them. And we back, y'all. But sad day, this is the last conversation we're having in this series before we go on our break. Well, we got a season closer coming next week, but we'll get to that later. So if you missed it, because it's our last conversation, we had one last week with my girl Chantel. It was really, really good. Y'all should cue that one up next. We talked about joy stacking, therapy breakthroughs, and why sometimes the funniest moments can be the ones that carry us through the hardest seasons. And real talk, it was life-giving, and you really just don't want to miss it. It was great. Chantel's amazing. Today, though, as I mentioned, this is the last conversation that I'm having before we do our season closeout for next week. I am joined by the amazing Jennice Chewlin, where we're talking about joy and well-being at work, in community, and in life. Jennice is a workplace well-being consultant, a community leader, and get this, y'all, soccer player who knows how to bring both fire and joy into every space she touches. We got into what it really means to practice joy as a strategy, not just a fleeting moment of happiness. And we also talked about the difference between joy and happiness, how joy can coexist with struggle without feeling fake or forced, why joy is actually fuel for activism, resilience, and connection, and how workplaces and all of us can stop hanging joy, can stop, leaving joy at the door when we clock in, and make it really a part of our everyday lives. This conversation was deep. It's practical. It's honest. I really, really, I've said this before. I love when conversations do this, and Jennice, this conversation with Jennice just does one of those things where I'm just like, this was just so fun, and it really makes you rethink what joy looks like in your own world. So tap into that. But before we get into the conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening right now, and hit that, subscribe button on YouTube if you are watching the video version. And I will say this, we are 9 subscribers away from our subscriber goal for YouTube. And if you are hearing the sound of my voice, do your boy a favor, click that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or click that link. There's a top link of the show description. Click that, it'll take you right to our YouTube page, and you can just subscribe. I made it easy for you. Really would love to hit that before the end of August. We can do it. I believe in us. I believe in us, right? Anyways, drop a comment, share this video with someone who needs it, and let's keep this conversation going. Really, really excited for you to check out this combo with Jennice. That is enough for me. I am done. No more. Here's my combo with my friend Jennice, y'all. All right. Okay, Jennice, we've already been chatting a little bit before. I am really excited to have you onto the pod today. We've been chatting for a minute beforehand, and so I've been looking forward to this conversation. Super excited to have you on. How are you doing today?
Jonathan, I am doing great. I have been looking forward to coming on to the podcast from the time that you posted that you were going to be talking all about joy, and Tanya, saying my name. I
Yes.
have been looking forward to saying, "What's up, Jonathan? Let's talk all about joy." I've listened to your other guests talk about it, and I can't wait to contribute to this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, shout out Tanya. Tanya is a real one for real. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm so glad she connected us. And yeah, a lot of the work that you do in organizations, maybe even individually, workshops and stuff like that, there's so much alignment. So I'm like, ah, ready to go. And you're right, we are talking about all about joy. But before we dive into the conversation, I would love for folks to get to know Jennice. So I'm gonna ask my favorite question, like, who are you? Who is Jennice? Like, share a little bit about with the folks who you are, and you can answer that any way you want. So I purposely
Great.
leave it wide open for you to share.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
I am Jennice Chewlin, and I like to introduce myself with this kind of broad, open-ended, give it to me how you want to. I love that.
yeah.
Thank you. I like to first say that I am a Latina mother, workplace well-being consultant, indoor co-ed soccer
There
player,
we go.
and yeah, and a community driven leader in my community, and just a person who is purely in its full essence curious about life, human behavior, and how joy is a key ingredient in all of our interactions.
Mm, we're having a good conversation.
That's right. That's
one
right.
one because like I'm a new soccer fan, like a new football fan,
Mm,
like within the last like 5-ish years. And
yeah.
so big ACFC fan, like season ticket holders, the last like we're OGs, like OGs from when the very
Nice.
beginning. So we be going to games at least like 10 a year. And then yeah, I love watching football now. So wife got me into it. I'm hooked. I was like, what took me so long? So
Right. And so,
yeah.
Jonathan, my origin story with soccer is my partner introduced it to me as
uh,
well. And I would love to say also another identity of mine is, wife.
mm,
And I did not touch a soccer ball until my early 20s.
wow.
Whenever I was in school and they'd give us, options in PE, badminton, soccer, badminton,
Yeah.
volleyball, soccer, volleyball.
Yeah.
And he is such an avid player. He's from Trinidad and Tobago, so soccer is in your blood.
Mm,
And he coached me, trained me, found me a team. And ever since then, I had that bug. I love it. We'll talk about this, but it's my go-to activity to help me reset and forget about everything else
mm.
except the game. So I
Yeah.
love soccer so much because of that.
That's so sick. I love that. I love that. And what's interesting is like, okay, this does connect. We're gonna get into all the other stuff about joy. I promised y'all. But the what's interesting is like that's basketball for me. So although I'm love watching football and everything like that, but I think the for me I play basketball and like that is and lifting that is like my go to like movement and a movement of choice because it's just
Hmm.
like it is what it is. Like once you shoot the ball, it is what it is. Like it's frustrating when it doesn't go in, but like when it does, that is just like money. And like the amount of time and practice and effort that I've put into like just getting the gooseneck. Like basketball
Hmm.
players know just the practice of it is just it's just a wonderful wonderful game. So I feel like the same thing of like that's my reset, that's my like release and that's the only thing I focus on. It's like just up down just like shoot the ball all that stuff so I yeah I love basketball so much like a lot yeah okay so I'm curious like I we talked about offline during our vibe call about joy and we already had a ton of overlap but I think I have said that folks believe that they have an understanding about joy or like maybe like this intuitive feeling or understanding about joy. So what I've been trying to do is like I've been asking folks like what do they believe joy is or what how they would define joy. So Janice, how would you define joy or what do you believe joy is?
Hmm. So I want to first say that I'll share what I believe my joy is, and
Mm,
I truly believe that we all have our own definitions of joy because joy looks differently for everyone.
yeah.
So my joy is an invitation to the present moment.
Mm,
It is also a feeling that I get of excitement, cheerfulness, and awe.
mm,
I will oftentimes know that I'm experiencing joy because I have deepened my relationship with it. I know I'm feeling it because I feel it through warmth.
mm.
I really feel it in my chest. My cheeks get flushed, and I look around to be like, is anyone else feeling this? Like, do you see what I see? I get so excited about it. So that's my definition of joy.
Hmm. When you shared that definition of joy, like how do you, particularly like rooms, maybe organizations, like how is it received?
Well, the topic of joy is often well received because it's such a positive, uplifting emotion.
Mm,
But the realness that comes out in conversations when we start talking about, wait, can we talk about joy in the workplace? Is that professional? Is it the right time? Especially when we're recording this, there's a lot going on in the world and in the United States. And so people start to, consider, is it the right time
mm,
for joy? And this is the part I really lean into is I consider myself an ambassador for joy at work.
mm,
And that's why I have the, label of La Reina de Joy, the Queen of Joy, because
mm,
I really do feel like it is my mission and duty as an ambassador to talk about how joy at work is a strategy as opposed to just a feeling.
mm.
And so when you ask the question, how is it received? And it's what I like most is it starts a conversation.
Yeah.
And that's well being at work. It's conversations, it's multiple entry points into well being. It's not one and done. And that is where I want to kind of introduce the topic of the difference between joy and happiness,
Mm,
because happiness is the one and done. Happiness is the external circumstance that, we attach our happiness to, saying, when I finish my project or when I finish paying off my student loans, then I will be happy. And we keep moving the guidepost.
yeah. Yep.
And so for joy, it's received well in work because we start shifting the conversation around how it's internal.
Mm,
And that helps us relate to folks around well-being,
mm,
is that well-being is internal. When work talks about it or provides an opportunity to engage,
mm,
we hope that it's through the understanding of that it's two parts. It's an ecosystem. There's things you have agency over yourself,
mm-hmm.
and it's also the systems that live that hold all of those opportunities, or I would say even barriers to accessing well-being, accessing joy, connection, trust
Mm.
at work. So it's a topic that I have been enjoying, no pun intended,
Yeah.
talking about. And really, Jonathan, it came from my own personal story of I lost sight of joy. So the
Mm,
definition I shared with you was not the same definition I had in 2019,
mm,
2020. But it's because I got curious with my relationship with joy that made me realize I was confusing it with happiness.
yeah.
I was allowing joy snatchers to come in and say, nope, not the right time for joy right now.
Mm-hmm.
Or you should be doing something else, not this joyful event. And in the moment that we're in right now, recording this, I think for me, even seeing pictures from this weekend over, we had a lot of
Oh
rallies
yeah.
over,
No,
right?
no king, no king,
No,
no king
right.
protest.
No
Yeah.
King's rallies, no King protests. Just seeing those photos and the slogans and the artwork and people dressing up as the Statue of Liberty and other things, and children and people breaking out in dances.
Yeah.
I felt so, again, that moment of joy that was sparked all over the nation, that we're talking about something serious, yet we're making space for joy.
Hmm.
We're allowing that connection to happen and the trust to be built with each other.
Yeah. I love that point around that kind of like that. What's the word? Intercepting of joy in the middle, in the midst of like hard, very hard things. I'll put it that way. And where even the response you said earlier around joy, not necessarily, is it okay to like talk about joy during hard things, right? Like, is it okay to even feel it? And I think that is the countercultural, like resistant, like beautiful aspect of joy is like, yeah, the answer is yes, right? And we saw it this past weekend. The other picture that my partner saw, because she went to a protest. I was working this weekend, but she went to a protest. Somebody was wearing a full Labu. Have you heard of Labubus? Okay,
No.
there are these like almost like a Furby esque kind of situation, but there are these like keychain, like doll stuffed animal situations. But somebody was in full Labubu like costume, and he had like a sign, and he was doing like a little dance on the side of the street during the protest. It's just like really cute. It's something that the kids are playing with nowadays. I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like one of those things, but that's like people love them. Like they're like the new craze and fad right now, but it's just like I love that
Mhm.
you said that around that insert of joy and interception of joy in the midst of like when we're not supposed to feel it. The other thing
Right.
that you said too around happiness, we're confusing happiness with joy. I think that that is a more accurate description of like what I've been attempting and trying to say. That we're not necessarily folks don't understand or know joy. Maybe that's true for them, maybe, but like we're confusing joy with happiness. Like when in the moments where I have like candy and I've been craving candy all day and I'm finally get that piece of candy, I'm like, yeah, that's it. But that's not necessarily. I don't. Maybe that is joy sometimes, but other times I feel like that could potentially just be happiness. But I think in particular in the workplace, um, it's so interesting to me that there is mm, a first, uh, like the first impulse is to like, what am, the first impulse is to like question whether joy is possible at work. Um,
Mhm.
and that just always like baffles me because I always like to have fun. Like personally, like to me that is something that I like to do. What is what is usually that first hurdle? Well, maybe the second hurdle because I think you described the first hurdle a lot in good depth. Like, what is that second hurdle that folks typically need to overcome as far as like that joy aspect of like now that you've talking about it, um, what would be that
Yeah,
next piece?
I think so. I think after like even the invitation to bring joy into work, after that, it's in what way?
Mm,
And the second part of that is like debunking myths around joy. We just talked about one, it being that confused with happiness. Another is spending time around that key point you just made, that joy and struggle can coexist.
mm-hmm,
And I think that is probably the most important second hurdle, because we live in a culture that's obsessed with either or thinking,
mm-hmm,
winning or losing, okay or not okay. That kind of binary thinking is what makes it hard to say, wait, these two feelings can coexist at the same time. And I love to share a story about my dad who taught me this lesson, because he grew up in Miami-Dade County in a neighborhood that clearly sent a message that said, you are not going to move beyond this little 5 block radius.
mm,
This is your life. But my dad, like so many of us immigrant children, so many of us first gen children, we dared to dream something bigger for ourselves, even though that circumstance and messaging was strong.
mm-hmm.
And it led my dad to have this dream, that audacity that he had. Said, you know what, I want to become a doctor.
Mm.
This is what I want to do. And it's by that sheer notion of having a dream, even though there was obstacles and struggles along the way and barriers, he was persistent and persevered, and he ended up going to medical school in
Wow.
Juarez, Mexico.
Mm.
I was born in El Paso, Texas, which is a border town of Juarez. And he would ride his bike every day across the border, say bye to us as a family, cross over and go to medical school. For years, he did this. And I share that story because if my father had reserved himself to the messaging or the barriers, he would have never pursued something that brought himself and later his family, his children, us, an opportunity that was bigger than that circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
So I often think about how it wasn't just his determination, but it was his humor and his love for his wife, my mom, us. And he really just kept saying, like, I'm building something bigger for us.
Mm.
And that kind of story just stays with me, that taught me that those two hard things and real things, I should say, joy, determination, struggle, pain, barriers, they existed at the same time.
Mm.
He did not wait for one to be over. He explored the possibility of them both occurring at the same time. And it's a lesson that maybe I didn't realize, growing up, but that it hit home hard for me back in 2020 when I was really investigating and curious around my journey in joy.
Mm. I really love that story because like I say that often. Like some of my biggest heroes are the folks that continue to dream and hope and envision like something that just isn't doesn't seem possible, doesn't exist yet. And it's like they're painting a picture of a new world. They're painting a picture of a new circumstance and they're going to like move toward it anyway. And
Yeah.
that is so it is so hard to do because like when you're going through something, when you're experiencing things, when you're seeing things, it is very, very difficult to like picture something new and then even communicate that message to other people and bring them with you and then continue to show up. But it's like, I think that there's like hope there, dream there. Like you really have to believe and like hold on to that. Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I think the joy is also the invitation to be silly, to play, to laugh at yourself. And,
Yeah.
that's what I say about my dad and his humor, because he went to Juarez, Mexico for school, for medical school. So he'll joke today. He'll say, yeah, I'm an MD. I'm a Mexican doctor. And people love it. I share that joke with others because it's funny, but it shows his humanity,
Yeah.
during all that struggle. And trust me, there's more to that
I
story for
believe it.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we all need to, like what you're saying, you have people in mind that you see have built something bigger than their circumstance, and it's inspiring.
Yeah.
And I think we all have an opportunity, if we're willing, to see that joy, it can be more than just a feeling. We have several emotions, right?
Mm.
Like 26 plus emotions. Sometimes for many folks, going back to like workplace and joy,
Yeah.
many folks have shared with me, look, I love that you're talking about this, but joy just seems too far for me, too
Mm.
far out of reach.
Yeah.
And my job isn't to get them closer. My job is to explore where they're at
Mm.
with them if they would like. And many times it's because they're folks will say that they now realize, oh, I was stuck there because I thought I had to wait for this struggle to be over to get to joy. And in these workplace settings, when we talk about joy, we're in community with each other.
Mm.
And so I love to hear when people share stories about a lesson that they learned, how they adapt that lesson to their own lives and say, wow, like I didn't realize, like, I'm having a hard time, but I can still look up. And I saw, they mentioned like for them, they said it was a small showstopper. And it's true that joy can be big and grand, and other times it's small and subtle.
Yeah.
And so they shared that, like, hey, I was looking down, 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 but what made me look up was this rainbow.
Mm, mm.
And when was the last time I saw one? Who knows? But I looked up and it was there. And that's for me, the message of joy. It's around us and within us. We just have to maybe wipe our eyes a little bit more or hear more stories about how joy can be used as a strategy to uncover that two can exist at the same time, or that pain doesn't cancel out joy. Rather, it can carry us through that struggle.
Yeah. I that I'm I feel so validated right now because I think I've been talking about it for a while, and sometimes when you're when you're one of few, or when it feels like you're talking about something new, and trying to communicate it, and again doing that envisioning and dreaming aspect of that around talking about joy in work, and like, folks are like, what does that mean? It is that thing of like, we are human beings that are incredibly complex, and like
Mm-hmm.
we could exist in our complexity, and that like we can smile when things are very difficult, and like that's okay. Like it doesn't have to be like a we don't have to feel any shame or guilt around that. And
Mm-hmm.
simultaneously, like we can also cry too when like things are very very good. Like I think that there's just so much complexity about us, and that like there's so many emotions that can coexist and be at the same time. um and so like there's been a couple conversations that I've had throughout the series where like we talked about this, and even in my own understanding around it, I'm like, when I like sit back and like think about like, let's keep it in the work context.
Mm-hmm.
Like I there's like one particular role like I'm thinking about when I was a admissions counselor, and I like that was my first job out of college. I loved that role so much because I'm engaging with kids who are students, students who are like looking at going to college for the first time. A lot of the kids I was talking with are first generation college students, child of immigrants, um, like Title One schools. Like it's like they are looking to make a change. They're looking to change their future and seeking education, all that stuff. And so having those conversations and like encouraging them, if not this school, if not college, then trade school, like thinking about their options, right? Even though my job was to get them to go to whatever, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But it was an incredible job. I love that role, and like that actually instilled in me like a lot of the work that I do today. But what was made that role miserable, what made me like truly like sad and like just in despair, was just like the where I worked, and also how we were treated in a role that was meant to be this celebration and like exploration of um future and like dreaming and hope,
Mm-hmm.
and like that did not exist, um at least organizationally. And so I think
Yeah.
that like that it's not a dichotomy, but it shows like where like those two things can exist. And unfortunately, one of those feelings like made it unbearable. But I always
Mm-hmm.
pinpoint that one when I'm talking about like career joy, is what I call it,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to explain to people of like those two things are very very real. And I remember one particular conference I was speaking at, how like I talked about how sad and upset and emotional I was, and hard and difficult, and the bureaucracy of higher ed and yada yada yada. And I was talking to a bunch of administrators in higher ed, and they didn't like that. But my thing is like both can be true. And I remember having a conversation after that session, and I was like, this person said, I completely understand what you're talking about because I feel that right now. I love
Mm-hmm.
being at the institution that I'm at. I love working with my team. I love creating these systems and like working with students and helping them, and they're exploring all these things. But when I go into these C-suite meetings of folks that don't really care or understand or kind of feel detached from that, this is very difficult. So yeah,
Well,
it's just
you
so,
bring up a good point too,
yeah.
Jonathan, about how, like, yes, two things can be true at the same time. And just moving in a little bit more in depth to that, the kind of joy we're talking about is not toxic positivity.
Yes, yeah,
Meaning where we're like, hey, turn away from that hard part
yes.
at work and those emotions. Turn away from that and only focus on the joy.
Hmm.
And just paste on a fake it till you make it smile. Come on now.
Yeah.
We're not we're not talking about that, because we've been with people who are like that
Yeah,
or spread that kind of culture, and that's not the kind of culture work I'm trying to build with
absolutely
orgs,
not. Yeah.
right? It's we're trying to say, let's get let's get good, I should say, at understanding our emotions so
Mm,
we can pinpoint, explicitly what it is we're feeling and why,
mm.
because then we're able to better manage it.
Yes.
That's it. We're better able to say, wow, like, I don't have to snap at the people I love. I don't have to, feel like I'm failing to find my footing, or, reach burnout. I don't have to do all that stuff if I can understand what I'm feeling and
Mm,
then use that information to communicate more with myself and my needs that I need to support, and also communicate with others at work, home, in my community about the support that I need. I think that's the kind of culture that I am trying to build with my business, Chewlin Group. And also, it's not just about work, it's everywhere we show up.
hmm.
It's our home, it's our community, and our where we play, essentially, going back to even the soccer, you know community, right? Like, that was the best community I joined, and made it a reason why I kept trying to get better at the sport so that I could be a better team player.
Hmm.
And then the camaraderie afterwards was something that I was like, I protected. I was
Yeah.
like, family, I end at 5, but I'm not seeing you till 7, because
Yeah.
I enjoyed that time with us. And it's so important that I left a team when I relocated and found a team here. I ended up leaving after a season because I didn't feel that camaraderie, that team player mentality, or at baseline, that they wanted to get to know me.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to show up and ignore it and say, hey, I'm just here to play. That's that fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
And it eventually eroded my mindset that communicating with my team players even became impacted. I could feel it. I was
Yeah.
a little, I was a little, I would say, like, just short with some of them. And it all really just stemmed because I didn't feel like there was realness.
Mm.
Nobody sat and was like, so you just moved here? Tell me more about it.
Yeah.
What brought you to it? Yet I was seeing conversations like that happening with others.
Mm.
So for me, it's about being real. Joy is about being real,
Yeah.
because that's what builds trust.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have trust, I believe that's what makes space for joy. We can relate on so many levels beyond a belly laugh, but
Yes.
to your point, share tears perhaps,
Yeah.
or even a nod from someone saying, "Yeah, this isn't right," or
Yeah.
"That was great." And then with that, this joy allows us to be resilient. So
Mm.
I really think it's a cycle, and joy is a thread that helps us build all of those pieces.
Mm. That is abs spot on, Janice, because I think that there's a and maybe we could plug it in here. I'm gonna let Reg. I'll send him a clip. Reg, there's a clip from the show called or there's this HR person from the show called Mythic Quest. And so in Mythic Quest, it's on Apple Plus. Mythic Quest, there's this HR person, and she's like smiling all the time, like she's the community manager, like all this stuff. But she's down in like the basement. She doesn't have any windows, and every time somebody sees her, she has this gigantic smile on her face, and she's tasked with like the worst jobs, like the worst stuff. Like this past season, she had to lay off like 200 people, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm not doing that. That's your job. You got to lay off an entire department and a whole wing." And she's like, "Okay," like, and it was very toxic, and she's trying to like be positive, everything like that. And you're
Mm.
exactly right. Like joy isn't like a toxic positivity. It is being real. It's being authentic. It's embracing like the whole spectrum of emotion. One of the things that I said, and I'm curious what you think about this. I've started to think that like experiencing joy and like feeling joy is like one of the most human things that we could do. Like I really do. Like I think that experiencing joy, like real joy, is just like a very, very human thing to do, and to try and cut that off from ourselves, whether it be at work, whether it be in different communities that we try and partake in, maybe even within ourselves. I think that we're cutting a piece of ourselves off, and I say that, and some people will probably think that that's like very like whoa, like chill. But I honestly believe that, because I think that when joy can look very differently, um, depending on who you are. But I think again, it's just, yeah, it's just real. It's just very, very real aspect. Because it have to again, it doesn't have to be a deep belly laugh. It could be a smile. It could just be a nod or anything, those things. But I think when we
Hmm.
don't fully experience that, or embrace that, or allow it to exist within us, I think maybe there's something else that's happening there. But yeah, I just think
Yeah,
it's a very real human experience when we actually embrace that aspect of ourselves.
it is. Yeah, it is. And you're helping me realize too, there's a word I like to introduce to people because we talk a lot. You and I just now we're talking a lot about how we can feel joy for our own experiences,
Hmm.
something that brings us to the present moment, or we connect with someone else. But then there's also a joy that we can feel for someone else's joy,
Mm,
and that's called mudita,
mm,
and it's Sanskrit for the joy felt for someone else's joy.
mm.
And just think about it when a colleague of yours calls you and says like, oh, I got the registrants, we made it, we built this up, we marketed it, and we have enough participants for this to move forward in the next phase.
Mm.
Something like work related like that. Or think of a sibling that calls you,
Yeah.
or a family member who's like, I passed,
Yeah.
I did it, or like a milestone event for them, hey, I'm a senior and I graduated. You know what that means to them and what it must feel like.
Mm,
So empathy and joy are related. And so is, I would say, like, for going back to what I was saying earlier, how sometimes joy might seem like it's the last thing you can reach for. I like to introduce people to adjacent words to joy.
mm,
And that could be like the words confidence, pride, wonder. These are words that, yeah, they're related to joy. They're adjacent. And that's good too.
mm.
Meaning you don't we all, again, there's that either or. I either feel joy or I don't. I'm
Yeah.
either good that I do or bad that I don't.
Yep.
And that's the kind of we want to address that. You and I are trying to address that in this conversation, that joy is something that can signal safety, for those shared connections and stories that we're talking about, and the collective part. Because yes, A, I can feel it, and B, I could feel your joy for you that happened.
Mm,
And that's just so exciting, and a part that we often miss or only contribute to in individual experience. But joy helps us remember that there's collective joy as well.
mm. So I love how you like name those different aspects, right? Of around like the joy adjacent words that really like can resonate with folks who just where the joy word isn't really landing.
Hmm.
Pride, like you're excited for somebody else when it happens for somebody else. Um, how does that really change? Like when somebody can understand that because you're right. We've been talking about this as like more of an individual thing, how we experience it or how an individual can experience it. But like when communities or groups or even maybe teams, organizations, like when they're able to like hold on to that idea, like how does that change? Um, Maybe even the systems, maybe even how they interact with one another. Like how have you seen that work out with some of the folks you
Well,
work with?
so the whole idea behind joy as a strategy is to start focusing on these three important points. The first is designing work for joy, not just efficiency.
Mm,
So what I mean by that, just to go a little deeper, is that we oftentimes will focus, especially now, right, when everything is urgent because of everything, like all the changes, all the defunding, all of the strategic implosions that are happening from administration at a national level. We oftentimes will, the first thing to go is connection because
mm,
there's a lot to do. And so when we look at designing work for joy, not just efficiency, it's bringing back the humanity piece that we just touched on. It's remembering that before we start a meeting, how do we want to start that?
mm.
We get to decide, right? There,
Yep.
sure, there are agenda templates, but part of this process, part of my process with advising organizations around building joy in work is looking at all the touch points that we're bringing people together. How are we starting? How are we curating that experience to be not just about tasks, but but also the people behind the task?
Mm.
And so, even talking about how, our first sports that really help us get in the moment and not focus on anything like that. That took a few seconds for us to connect ahead of us getting into the meat of the
Yeah.
conversation, right?
Yep.
And it now that topic has allowed us to keep connecting back to it because we found a touch point
Mm,
that we relate on. So there's that connection. And then another part of that strategy is around looking at some of the systems is how do we embed joy as a practice versus just a quarterly retreat,
mm,
right? We reserve joy oftentimes. And so my role is to help bring the lens of joy in the front and center so that we have multiple touch points. Another idea here is first, remembering that because joy looks differently for everyone and it's at the intersection of well-being, that we can keep doing the work of joy through these adjacent activities.
mm.
So, what are some things that we can help our teams feel proud about? And there's that celebration piece that you talked about. You didn't have any, and what that felt like.
Yeah.
Well, what's it going to feel like when we celebrate our people for all the wins, not just the big wins, not just that they secured enough folks for this new program, because I'm in public health, right? And so a lot of my work is in community work, program planning.
Mm.
And boy, oh boy, don't we work hard to design a program. Now we need to get people to sign
Do
up
it.
and be part of it.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing. But it's all about celebrating as well. And so we want to help people have these tiny recalibrations that bring joy back to themselves and others in connecting. And then the last part of like changing how joy can help change our systems or even the way we work is going back to what we just said, which is that joy is about showing up. It's not about pasting on a smile. It's not about saying, I will get to joy once this is done. But it comes from like saying, being real with ourselves and saying, you know what? I'm overwhelmed today,
Hmm.
or I don't got this.
Hmm.
It's it's not showing a sign of weakness when you say that. It's showing integrity. And when you can be honest with others, then people will be more honest with you.
Mm.
And there's that trust piece that I'm talking about, right? Honesty and trust. and collaboration, commitment, all of that is breathed through joy. And if we don't design for joy, guess what gets replaced? It's the guilt, it's the shame, it's the checking out.
Yeah.
It's saying like, you know what? No more.
Mm.
I'm not going to I did a workshop with intergenerational teams. And the younger folks, I had one person who was, she said she was from Gen Z, and they said how if there isn't joy at work, she doesn't want to show up.
Fair.
And everyone looked around, and I
Yeah.
was like, can you say that again?
Yeah, fair.
I want to wake up and know that like I'm making a difference, that there is purpose to my role, and that I'm going to find ways to have fun.
Yeah.
And there you go.
Mm.
COVID taught us the lesson that we are changing the how, where, and why we work. And you do see that the organizations who get on that bandwagon and say, you know what, I give a damn and I believe in people and I want to center my employee voices, you see them gaining the top talent, retaining the top talent, and then making the impact that they really want to make in their business model.
Mm. That's so true. I think when I've been in intergenerational rooms when folks have communicated that, what's interesting is that like I'm how was that received from other folks? Why? How was that received from other folks?
How was it received from other folks? It wasn't, it was this. And that's in that nod. For those listening, I'm like giving a nod of, mm-hmm, yes, ma'am. Keep saying that.
Yeah.
Because no matter what age we are, I think we all realize, wait a minute, we deserve joy.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to put joy in the coat rack when we get to work.
Yeah.
It could, it's within us, we can spread it. But I want to honor too that many folks who may be listening to this might be like, this does sound too toxic to me. You've said joy 57 times already in 40 minutes, and I want to honor that.
Yeah.
And again, it's about being real.
Mm-hmm.
And what helps, especially if there's some leaders here listening, managers or top leaders, is to remember that you create the culture. You give permission, you set the pace, you set the tone. So if this kind of work is something you really want to provide to your team because you know the impact it's going to make,
Mm-hmm.
I would say to remember to just start small. You don't have to do it all. You just have to start. You just have to be willing to say, I think this is a good idea. There might be others who will champion it with you. And maybe there's not, but let me tell you what does happen in some of the engaging activities that I do.
Mm-hmm.
I have the folks in the room, most people are like, yeah, let's talk about joy. There still are people who are cross-armed, leaning back, and who are like, not for me.
Yeah.
But when we go through a couple of these engagement activities, what do I notice? Softening of postures,
Mm.
smiles and grins, people thumb upping each other. And we need to keep telling stories about this because I want people to know it's available and it's doable.
Yeah.
You have to work within what you have, what resources you have. And speaking of resources, if leadership is listening, is like to really provide that, not just the time and space to meet and talk about how we can build a culture of joy at work, but resources too, like financial resources. I have one organization that they were given, this culture committee was given funds to host a few events to embrace this joy at work.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it could look differently for everyone, but
Yeah.
they decided that they wanted to host a collaborative art lunch hour where people, whatever you worked on, you can bring it to the day of your event and showcase it. Some people are big knitters. people remember COVID, all the sourdough
Yes.
starters.
Yeah. Yeah.
So people brought their sourdough, people were bringing jams, other people brought collages, and it was more visual art.
Yeah.
But the idea was just bring something that you created,
Mm.
and let's talk about it. And leadership provided funds for lunch, time for them to get together. And the results that I heard from that event was that, oh my gosh, like I was able to laugh, hear stories about why people, started sourdough or collaging. And again, it brings us back to what we're doing, connecting as humans.
Mm.
We sever the mind body connection, and we sever workplace and well-being so hard that these little tiny moments, while they might seem like, are you joking, you just held a collaborative day and that brought you all team spirit and connection, the answer is yes, because it brings us back to who we are as humans.
Mm. I we're coming close to a close, I promise. But I one of the questions that story is, I love that because I think folks forget that childlike wonderment with like the excitement of like show and tell, of like you do this thing at
Mhm.
home and then you get to bring it like whether it's your goldfish or like for me I had
Mhm.
this little remote control boat that I had growing up and I was super excited to share. Like there's something about that we get to reveal a different aspect of ourselves that taps into, yeah, the real like human aspects of us where we don't have to be robots anymore, which that is something I when I talk to clients too, I'm like, yo, like we could be human, like it's okay, like I'm a husband, brother, son. That's how I lead off with every introduction, because these are parts of me that are incredibly important. But
Yeah.
I this is like an example that brings me to a question in particular around the intersection between like healing and liberation, because when I hear that, it's a very like liberative experience where like folks show up, they share a different part of themselves, and then all of these walls come down, right? How does like joy, and you shared a little bit about it, but I would love to hear you more specifically like talk about it. How does joy like play into that aspect? You could use that example that you just gave, but like, or another example, but how does joy really like feed into that our like intersects with that collective healing and even liberation that you've experienced or seen?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my work is in with organizations. I have about half are nonprofits, half are for profits, and
Mm,
then I have community work. And the thread that holds them all together around this work is that we're starting to see that not just now, but forever, joy has been used as a survival skill.
mm,
And to that, your piece of like the liberating piece is is that we remind ourselves that we're all doing important work.
mm,
We really are. In no matter what, you're at work, in your community, in your family, in your own self. We're all doing important work. And we realize that joy is the work.
mm,
It helps us feel connected and liberated because we get to tap into a place of ourselves and each other that reminds us that we're not alone, we are valued, and we are loved.
mm,
And so when we start to falter or get distracted or start to withhold joy, it's through these small interactions, Jonathan, that really embody ourselves to remind our neighbors, our families, our coworkers that I got you.
mm,
And that feels so good. That's the confidence piece. And that's what feels so liberating, is that we can rewrite our definition, and we can change how we want to show up with it, how we want to interact with it, embody it. And most specifically, I would say that, with this group, I run a leadership group called Joy as Resistance.
mm,
And we are a collective group who meets online over a few months. And we dissect some of these same questions that you're asking. How does joy liberate us? How does joy impact our well-being? And it's in these spaces where we get to share our wisdom with each other and say, "What? Me too.
Mm,
I also am in first gen, and my parents also taught me this about work and how that interacts with rest." And joy, again, is that thread through rest, self care, self love, well being, collective joy. That if when, well, I'll say, when we are in spaces like that, we're reminded that we aren't alone.
mm.
And this could be a very lonely journey, life, right? Could be a very lonely journey, but what's beautiful is that joy helps us make those connections.
I love that. I love that. Awesome. Well, we're coming up to, and thank you so much, Janice, for sharing so much with us. One of the questions I've been asking every guest is, what is bringing you joy right now in this season of life?
Oh, well, this season of life right now has me entering in the summer season in a time of my life where I get to reflect on the last many years of being my family's child caretaker.
Mm,
And what's bringing me joy right now is the sense of pride I feel for having been able to do that for my family,
mm,
this sense of accomplishment that I did. I opened up my business, grew my business, and still provided for my family in that way. So I feel very proud and accomplished doing those things. And what's bringing me joy is another sense that I get to I get to do work that I find most meaningful, which is helping folks better understand their health and well-being through the lens of real human experience with all of our identities
mm.
and contribute to the way we're changing how, when, where we work
Yeah.
and creating cultures of workplaces that help teams feel nourished instead of drained or closer to burnout. I feel very proud that I get to be part of that journey for organizations as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's amazing. Um, and last tidbit of wisdom, like if somebody's like listening and they're feeling a little bit disconnected from joy, whether at work, in their community, in their own personal lives, maybe even in their bodies, right? What's one thing that you would invite them to notice and probably try?
There's a quote actually I want to share
Heck yeah.
by Karen Waldron. She is the author of the Lightmaker's Manifesto.
Mm,
And that was the book for me
mm,
that answers your question of like, how would you tell someone to get in touch with joy or look at ways that they can get closer to it or experience it in a new way. And she has a quote that says, "I will never apologize for seeking joy and beauty,
mm,
even when the world is falling apart, because joy and beauty are my fuel for activism."
mm.
And that's it for me,
Yeah.
is to sometimes we can't see it or have it, but we can perhaps just try to make it on our own.
Mm,
And Karen talks a lot about that, is we can be the light, we can see the light, we can reflect the light. Sometimes we have to just make it
mm,
ourselves. We have to make our light, collect tinder, clean out a space where we can collect all of our tinder, find what kind of fuel we want for the fire, what tool do we want to light this, tinder with. And she has a beautiful book with a lot of resources and valuable stories collected through interviews from people of all different walks of life doing all different types of work
mm.
who remind us that it's within us, and sometimes we just have to make it ourselves, even though it might not be around our circumstances. Is what are the small changes we can make for ourselves? And that could even mean just looking at a circumstance in a different way,
Mm,
to the point we mentioned earlier of like heavy and painful work around rallies,
hmm.
looking for like what are the sparks of joy that we saw. And the role of music, oh gosh, there we
Oh my
go, that's a
gosh.
good tip.
Yeah. Yeah.
The role of music, what's that's advice is like everyone has a go-to song that helps them feel fired up or help us recover from a hard day.
Hmm.
Is I would get back in touch with music and use music as a way to connect back to ourselves and others.
Yeah, yeah. I'll plug a an episode because like that's one of the ones that we dropped. We talked about music as like a connecting point. But hell yeah, Janice, that was a full circle moment. That was like you just wrapped it up. That's podcasting, baby. That's like wrapped it up perfectly because we talked about painting a picture that we didn't see yet, and so that I feel like that
Yes.
is a beautiful imagery of like creating our own light is creating a future that we don't see or changing the circumstances by moving forward. So thank you so much for everything you shared. You were cooking in this episode. So I really do appreciate you. Um, and I'll be sure to plug everywhere that folks can tap in with you and all the resources and everything like that. But thank you so much for sharing with the group and or with the team and with the team with with the listeners and watchers. I appreciate you so much. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too, Jonathan. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Of course. So in most of my conversations throughout this series, I sound like a daggone broken record. We've said repeatedly that joy can coexist with struggle. Joy can coexist with hardship, with grief. You know what I mean? Like that's not new to us. Again, broken record. I'm saying that myself or the guests, right? But what I especially appreciate that Janice added was that joy isn't something we have to wait to experience, like when things are easy. Like we don't have to wait for things to get easier to experience joy. Like we can experience joy in any season, right? And I appreciate that approach because I think it really like names something that like we haven't explicitly named. Is yes, joy can coexist with grief and hardship and struggle, but like we don't have to wait for those things to be over. Like we can joy is that thing, that feeling, that emotion that can sit right next to the struggle while still acknowledging the struggle. It's not pretending that it's not there. It's not that toxic positivity. You know what I mean? It can show up in tiny human ways. We talked about like the show and tell moment at work, just bringing you back to that like childlike wonderment of like expressing parts of yourself authentically and genuinely with the people that you work with or the people that are in your life, whatever. It can be a pickup game, you know what I mean? That resets your nervous system, right? When you're having a hard ass week, you're like, for me, I go hoop, I go lift. And like those moments reset my nervous system. Like those are moments of joy for me. It could be like that spark of pride when you really try something new and you might not work out, but you tried it new and you damn, like be proud of yourself. Like those are those moments of joy. Or it even can be that mudita joy, that kind of joy that Jenny's introduced us to, where it's being genuinely happy for someone else's win. And I think about work. We talked about work a lot. Like both of us do consulting work and coaching work and stuff. And you can design for it. Like it's well-being, it's employee experience. Like you can design for joy to be present on your teams, in your meetings, and how we celebrate each other. It just comes down to those like small, honest choices that we make over time. It doesn't have to be big, granular, grand? I don't know. It doesn't have to be a big thing. You know what I mean? I was really appreciated that conversation with Jennice. Super practical, honest, direct to the point, and she was spitting, not lying. That was a great episode. But it's your turn, y'all. I would love to hear from you. So the prompt for this week is what's one tiny way you're going to design for joy this week? at work or maybe at home, right? Maybe it's starting a meeting with a real quick check-in. How was your weekend? Um, that's a human connection thing that like sparks some joy in folks. What's your favorite thing to do in your area? Maybe it's queuing up that song that gets you back in your body. Or maybe, just maybe, it's planning a little show and tell with your people. Maybe it's at work. You got a work meeting. Everybody brings a show and tell thing. Or maybe you do a show and tell with the people that are in your own household. Like, what do you want? What would you tell if you were talking to your partner or your kid about like something that like is near and dear to you, or you have, or whatever. I'm gonna try that with Lance, and I'll tell y'all how it goes. Y'all give it a try. Let me know how it goes. Report back. Drop a comment below if you're on YouTube, or send me a voice note or voice message. That link is in the description as well. I would love to hear from y'all. And hey, if you are new here, don't forget to subscribe to our show on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. And another quick plug, y'all. I am 9 subscribers away from my YouTube goal. So if you are hearing the sound of my voice again, what are you waiting for? Hit that link in the description. It's right up at the top, easy for you. Or click subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Help your boy out. Help your boy out. I believe in us again. And if you missed the last one with Chantel Carnegie, go back and listen. She dropped some gems about therapy, joy stacking, and finding levity in unexpected places. That is it, y'all. As always, thank you so much for rocking with me. Thank you for being a part of this community. And thank you for choosing to spend time with me here. I really do appreciate it. Yeah. Until next time, y'all. Peace.